Welcome to the Nonprofits. For our third segment this week, well, I'll just let Stephen give us the details.
Thanks, Scott.
Sure.
I hope you're all sitting down for this one. A local Christian pastor says killing women will shut them up. So, Pastor Joel Webon of Covenant Bible Church in Texas, of all places, says that a Christian nation governed by the Bible would see the end of #MeToo movement. His rationale being that publicly executing just a few of the lying women would see all of the false accusations cease. This story is reported on in a few different places, including the Mary Sue by Rachel Alatowski on October 21st, 2024.
All right. Well, let's get into it here, Stephen. So whether or not we consider this punishment appropriate, and I think we're all leaning in one particular direction, but the Bible might very well say otherwise. Okay. So what do you think of Joel Webon? Not necessarily your personal opinion, but just your opinion about this approach. What do you think of Joel Webon looking to the Bible for moral guidance on this issue?
Like it's mind blowing. It boggles my mind that someone can be so inured to any kind of critical thinking and empathy and just trying to understand a perspective other than their own entitled, empowered perspective. Just so that we have the fullest understanding of the concept that this sermon from his pulpit that he was preaching is his pulpit, which is in the dining hall of a restaurant that they rent, I guess. His rationale being that if this were a Christian nation and he is a Christian nationalist, that the Bible would then be the law of the land, and therefore, if someone is found guilty of assaulting a woman, then he should be put to death. And under that paradigm, if someone is found guilty of falsely accusing someone, then they receive the same punishment that their accusee would have received. And so in this case, a woman who was lying about these allegations would then receive that punishment. She would be the one put to death. And it just boggles my mind that he would say that from the pulpit that just killing a few of these women would stop this. I guess in his fantasy world, that this is like a widespread problem and that women are the enemy and that they should be stopped for spreading all of these lies. And I don't understand how anyone can be so inured to common sense and just like actually hearing another person sharing their experience, and just how empowered, how entitled must you be to have your ears stuffed so hard that you can't possibly hear what someone is saying. Damien,
do you think that, do you agree with what Stephen's saying? I mean, what's your take on what could be motivating this guy to say these hateful things?
Look, I think Stephen said Christian nationalism, and I think, and Christian nationalism follows on from my time when I was a fundamentalist Christian. I think I was more familiar with the term dominionism, which they're both essentially the same thing. But my question, I suppose my thing here is: has the death penalty actually stopped a particular type of crime from happening? And we know, for example, in the US, that the death penalty is mandated. Well, it's not mandated, but is a punishment for murder. For example, in various Asian countries, the death penalty is used for drug smuggling and trafficking, but that doesn't seem to have solved those problems. So I'm not too sure, aside from the promotion of religious dogma, I'm not too sure why Webon thinks that punishing, like killing a woman, would stop false accusations, when we know that for much more drastic things like murder and drug trafficking, that the death penalty hasn't stopped those things.
Because he doesn't want to stop the sexual assaults. He just wants to stop women from talking about it. That's his aim there.
That sure seems what's happening here.
I would actually argue as well that this is something in the Mary Sue article, if you look towards the bottom of it, they actually highlighted quite correctly that Webon doesn't seem to have called for the execution of actual rapists. And in the article, they actually made a few actually made a few links to news reports of actual rapes that have resulted in either disfigurement or the death of the person, of the victim. And Webon seems to be fairly quiet about that. Like he will probably give some sort of lip service to, rape is bad. Yeah, those people are heinous. But to actually call for the death of women who make false allegations, it's like, okay, that's using a hammer to turn off a light switch, essentially. Then the other problem that Webon has is that how prevalent are false rape accusations? And I would say hardly. Like, yes, they exist, but hardly.
Right.
Like,
not nearly to the extent that's being suggested here.
Yeah, but exactly. Keep these uppity women in their place. That's all.
I think that's a part of it, but I think it's more. Sorry, you first, Kelly. You first.
Sorry,
no, you first.
I that was all I wanted to say. We just this mindset of we got to keep these uppity women in their place. That's it.
That makes great radio. We're just sitting here staring at Kelly for.
But what I did want to point out, and this is something I did put in my show notes, was that the way the Mary Sue actually covered this article, I'm going to say, is actually fairly unbalanced. Like when the link came in the show notes, I thought, well, hold on, why did he say that? What's his reasoning? Where is he coming from? And I did not get that from the Mary Sue. Now, I understand the Mary Sue is, I suppose, very heavily to the left of the political spectrum. So I actually had to do some Google searching to find, okay, what did Joel Webon actually say? What context did he say it in? What's his motivation? Rather than just, Joel Webon is bad because he wants to kill women. Okay, cool. We know that, but let's give a bit more background and a bit more flavor to the article about why. And so I found a link to cron.com, which seems to be an independent media outlet, that actually did go into, a bit more of his history and his motivations and, what he was actually saying in paragraph form rather than, Christian nationalist bad.
So what was the difference then? Was the take in the other article different than the take on this one?
Well, to me, is the Mary Sue trying to be information or opinion? Is the thing
this is when we were earlier this week. We were talking about educating people to figure out good sources. This is one of the things we have to educate Americans to understand what's news and what's opinion, because half of Americans don't know the freaking difference. Yeah,
and so sometimes the two get mixed up. So I think, so when I read this article, now I know we're not talking about the Mary Sue, but I think it's a good segue anyway, to discuss, when a media organization puts out an article, we have to differentiate. Well, hold on, is this just a polemic? Is this actually trying to say something that the reader doesn't already believe? Is this, whereas if I read from the cron.com, and I've got the link in my show notes, there's actually a lot more. If you compare the two articles, one is trying to inflame you, one is trying to inform you.
So maybe it's some of that fear mongering on the left that we were talking about earlier this week.
I think so too, because the real flavor I got from the Mary Sue piece was, Christian nationalist bad. Well, I get that he's bad, but give me a bit more context, give me a bit more, a bit more color. Don't just give me a black and white. Give me something that.
Right. Well, I think it's very valuable to make sure that we have an unbiased and comprehensive knowledge of the situation before we get too far into judgment. But let's not stray too far from the point here. We there was video of him standing in the pulpit saying that we should execute women. And they didn't really comment about anybody in the congregation saying anything or standing up and leaving. Kelly, what are your thoughts on that? What would you do if you were in Webon's congregation on the day that he said that in the pulpit?
I have more morals than Mr. Webon has, so I definitely would have stood up. I don't know if I would have actually walked out. I might have actually stood up and said something. So, but I want to point out, and this might piss everybody off, Joel Webon is right. If you kill someone, whether they're a woman or not, it does tend to shut them up.
Okay.
So apparently he isn't 100% stupid. But if you need a blueprint for stupid, this guy is it. That's all I'm saying. Can I take a second out from the panel for a second? Mr. Webon, if you feel that I just mischaracterized you, please please contact me. I need the entertainment. And I want you to know, though, that things can get better. I myself, and this is very true, I was a homeless, drug addicted alcoholic suffering from PTSD, and now I run my own business with my son. So things can get better for you. You just have to apply yourself and that thing, your brain. You might as well start using it for something. Thanks, everyone, for letting me have
the
that.
more you know, right? I feel like this is a Saturday afternoon special, and this is Kelly giving his motivational speech here. Hang in there, Joel Webon. You can turn things around. Stephen, I would like to come back to you for a second here. So he's talking about this kind of thing from his religious perspective, and I would imagine, although I didn't see his specific justification for saying it, maybe there'll be some of that in the blowback here. But so we're talking about freedom of religion on one hand, whether or not you think that his religion actually promotes the kind of ideas he was promoting, but we're still talking about freedom of religion. But on the other hand, we have the safety of the community and of the public in general. How can we balance that? How can we balance? This is an easy one for you. I'll lobbing you up a softball here. Exactly. How do we balance religious freedom with public safety?
Well, I think public safety, your what is it that your religious freedoms stop
ends at the tip of my nose or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Your right to swing your arm. That was it.
I'm just going to punch the air, and if you happen to get in the way, your religious liberties start and end with you, and they don't extend beyond that. And anyone's safety is not secondary to your religious freedoms. And it's wild that people would ever consider otherwise. And in this fantasy land where white Christian men get to make all the rules, in this fantasy land where women and children are the property of men, how can in what way there is no room for that in our civilization. If you want to be having your own private fantasies about that's your discretion, but the rest of civilization knows better than that, and we need to be able to fight to protect exactly that.
So you think there's a fundamental clash between his right for religious freedom in this particular instance and the need for public safety and for it's more than just a matter of public safety, right? It's specifically on women and women's freedom and trust and feelings of safety in coming forward and reporting acts of sexual assault and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So you think that there's a fundamental difference, that they can't be balanced. We have to lean one way or the other in this case. Is that what you're saying, Stephen?
Yeah. If we're saying that, his religious freedoms means that he should be able to stone a woman that he found guilty of adultery, then we're going to curtail those freedoms, motherfucker.
Right.
But for him to believe, for him to wish, for him to want, you can cash that in at the bank if you like. But your what you believe personally, nobody's going to stop him from believing something. Nobody's going to stop him from holding that belief. But as soon as that belief is going to have a negative impact, and that was such a huge piece of my deconversion, is realizing just how much disrespect I held for people who weren't a part of my in circle, my in group. And for me, being a good Mennonite pacifist, I could bear that burden for those people without getting violent about it. But it was still that didn't stop me from holding that kernel of disrespect for anybody that was on the outside. And it was so liberating when I was able to release that and say, hey, those people that think differently than me aren't inferior to me, but they're actually equal to me.
So what you're saying then is that the way you were talking about society also reflects kind of like a little microcosm of what was in your own mind. You had your own personal clashes. You were religious. You saw this hateful speech and these hateful ideas, and there was that fundamental clash, and it just couldn't, it was not couldn't mesh, right? And so that led to your deconversion. And that leads perfectly into my next question for Damien. Will this type of thing lead to the undermining of the respect of religious organizations? And if that's the case, is that ultimately a good thing?
I think it will lead to the undermining of religious organizations, just in that it's one more example of what we would call an unhinged Christian nationalist pastor.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for examples of, dumb things that pastors have said, I think you could put up a Wikipedia page of all the things that Joel Webon has said. It's a highlight. And I think, yeah, it's very hard to now. Look, I actually think Joel Webon should be out there saying these kind of things because it exposes, what he thinks. Because I think the more dangerous thing is, let's say Joel Webon was an underground church pastor that had been suppressed by the government or by other forces, and then let's say he was running a cult, and then only do you find out later on, once you're inside it, once he and his group have his hooks into you, that you find out that he calls for the stoning of women who make spurious sexual assault claims. Then it's like, oh shit, it's too late to get out. But the fact he's up front and he's able to say it and record it means we can see up front with very little cost to us, except for our time, that this guy is all full of stupid ideas. So let's get on the front foot and actually discuss these stupid ideas so we can be the antidote to his stupid ideas.
Right. So shining a light on the situation, right? We want to expose it so that way we can fix it.
And this is what I was saying before about having the plurality of voices. The answer to bad speech isn't cutting speech down, is having more speech so we can evaluate and have these discussions and bring things out into the open so that, as I say, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
I agree completely. So Kelly, as Damien just said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. If we expose this, we can talk about it. We can make caring, compassionate decisions, reasonable decisions about how to proceed, how to deal with these types of situations, how to deal with these types of people that spread these hateful messages. Do you think, Kelly, this is going to be something that will become less common as we see these things, as we shake our fists and people read about this in the newspaper and say, that's a horrible thing? Will they still go to church the next Sunday? Or as Stephen did, will some of them start realizing, wait a minute, there's a clash here. I'm going to stop going to that church or stop going to church at all. Do you think this is a problem that's going to be around for a while longer? Or, because I have to admit, it's stuck around a lot longer than I've expected. This kind of thing started popping up, within the last 5 years, the last 8 years or whatever. And so, I expected people to react much more swiftly and much more severely. Do you think this is a long-term problem, or do you think this is something that will be self-correcting perhaps within our lifetime?
Scott, I said it earlier this week, America was founded by a bunch of crazy religious fanatics. So is this going to go away? No, it's never going to go away. Can we fight it? Yes. Should we fight it? Most definitely. Right. And I think that I think what we're going to see is and what we have seen throughout American history is this kind of stuff goes in waves. It goes in cycles. And we're just in a big cycle of it right now. I look at this as like one more satanic panic that we're living through. The first one, we got alcohol legalized. Ooh. And then we had the second satanic panic in the 80s. And now we're going through another one. And the second one was about culture, right? Oh, we can't play D&D. Rock and roll music is bad. But this one that we're going through, this one is actually targeting people. This is bad. This is alcohol to games and culture. And now to actual people we're attacking with our religion. So are we going to get rid of it forever? No. This cycle of it is really, really, really bad, though. I think this is probably the worst satanic panic we've lived through in the last 100 years.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. Stephen, I'm going to give you the last word. So I want to make sure that we bring it back around to the real victims of what's happening here. So how does his stance highlight broader cultural challenges surrounding regarding the accountability of men who have been accused of abuse versus the treatment of women who report it.
Well, yeah, like I'm like, I am glad that at least four of us, cis guys can be sitting here and like speaking up and holding these shitty values held by men to the fire, because this is, yeah, it's one thing for us to say that it's good for Webon here to be saying these things out loud so that the world can hear him say these things, but most importantly, I hope that the people within his church are hearing him say these things, and that they're actually able to dig in and say, what do we actually think about this, and not just say, oh well, pastor said it, so it must be good. I know I was reading the transcript of that part of his sermon, and he actually doubled down and he recognized that I just made some people in the congregation here uncomfortable, and that's good, because the truth should make you feel uncomfortable, and like getting himself really hyped up as a result of that. So he stands by this kind of narrow view, and we need to be able to call it out for what it is, and let people know that there is an alternative to that. I think guys like this are beyond reaching. He has no motivation for changing his thoughts in this way. Like, he is at the top of the pyramid as a white cis het Christian pastor. Like, what on earth would possibly motivate him to try to empathize with others? But I think that this is at least one place where atheists and like sane Christians can be in agreement and say, no, this is bullshit. And we in our personal sphere, where we do have some influence, some control, this is where we can say, no, these ideas are garbage ideas, and we will not stand with them, and we will stand against them. And that's the most that we can do. Shitty people are going to believe shitty things. People who want to believe shitty things are going to walk around until they find someone who will tell them these shitty things that they want to hear. We can't change that, but we can still add our voices to the din and try to make this place, the world, a better, safer spot for the people who are disenfranchised and marginalized, like wonderful women on our planet.
So maybe we could fill in the missing shitty, the people that are wanting to hear shitty things. Maybe we can fill their ears with things that are not so shitty.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Make it harder for them to hear it.
What's that?
Make it harder for them to hear that shitty message.
Exactly.
That they
drown out the bad voices, drown out the bad stuff. If you want to help us drown out the bad stuff, you can click one of these links.